Okay, hi everyone. I'm Fran, and thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to an evening with Hooni Kim. This evening's program is part of our Young Professional series, which is generously supported by SK. It is our great pleasure to introduce Jason Cho, a food blogger at Insatiable Palate, and our very special guest, Hooni Kim, owner-chef of the highly acclaimed restaurant Danji, recipient of a Michelin star in 2011 and 2012. It is so appropriate that Hooni is here at the Korea Society tonight. He has been hugely instrumental in introducing Korean cuisine to Americans. Please welcome Jason and Hooni.
So, Chef, how are you? Doing very well. We talked on the phone about a week ago, and then we're mic'd. Okay, and you said, "Oh, I'm going here, I'm going there." I called Danji, and they're like, "Oh, we don't know where he is. He's so busy." But how has been the end of the year? Because we have
Well, we're still in a mad dash to open up Hanjan, our second restaurant, before the year's end. We went through the same thing opening up Danji. We really wanted to open it up before the next year, and exactly the same thing. So we're still trying to open before the end of the year, and still so much stuff to do. But
Right.
hopefully we'll get there.
Okay. So, for those who don't know a lot about Chef Hooney's background, we're gonna give it to you. So let's talk about your college background. Let's start with Berkeley.
Well, I grew up in New York since I was 10. I'm a product of New York City public education. I went to Bronx Science, and then I went to UC Berkeley, which is another public school. And then after that, I went to medical school at University of Connecticut, which is another public
Right.
school. So I've done a lot of public school education. Um, well, yeah, that's enough of the education. After that, I ended up going to French Culinary School Institute in Soho, and that's when my educational background
Let's
finished.
talk about that though. You know, it was your fourth year. You said your fourth year.
Yes,
And then
I had just passed my board. Well, no, I had passed my boards, and in medical school, you go to school for 2 years, then you pass your boards, then you start doing rounds, and then your last semester, that you don't really do anything. You're just applying for residency, and that's when I actually started getting sick. I started getting these headaches, migraines, and I thought it was the stress, the pressure. I really did not want to be in hospitals at that time. I had been in hospital since high school. I was volunteering at the Cornell University Medical College. Even in college, I would come back during the summer, and I would be working at the hospitals. And that's what I thought I wanted to do for a very long time, until it came down to sort of applying for residency and committing the next 6 years, which was what I wanted to do, the neurosurgery residency. That's when I started getting sick, and I thought, okay, this is my last chance to sort of spend a year to do what I want to do. So I took a year sabbatical. I didn't have the money to travel and eat like I wanted to,
Right.
so I took out another loan to go to French Culinary Institute. It was a 9-month program, and while I was there, I ended up staging,
can you explain what start? Yeah.
working for free at restaurants. I ended up staging at Tocqueville, which still exists. Who at that time the chef was the chef at Aldea, George Mendez, and I learned so much from him. He told me to go to Crew, which now doesn't exist, but the chef was Shea Gallant, who owns Ciano now. And that's, I did that for 9 months. And I still, at that time, I thought I was going to go back to medical school.
Right.
I had 3 months to kill. So what I ended up doing was trying to stage at the best restaurant that I could get into. Um, and I went to Alain Ducasse.
Right.
They said no because they're a union restaurant.
Okay.
So they're not allowed to have free labor. So then I went to Danielle, and I told them I would work for 3 months for free, and I started doing that. And the third week, the executive chef Jean-Francois asked me what I planned to do after the 3 months, and I said I have to go back to medical school. And then he was like, "Well, what if I gave you a job?" And honestly, I pretended to think about it for a couple of days, but no, I mean, that was a dream come true because I had been told, even work, as a stage there, I've been told people work 10 years at other restaurants to try to get a job there. And what I did realize, and what was the most convincing was, I was looking at these chefs at Danielle, and I respected these guys so much more than the doctors that I was working for. Not because of intellect.
That's a sin in the Asian community. You can't say that in public very often.
Yeah. But to me, that's what I wanted to become more than a doctor. So that's when I sort of decided maybe I have another profession or career to think about. And I still didn't give up medicine. I took another year sabbatical. And actually, I have to admit, I did that 3 times.
Yeah.
So
until they said,
don't come back.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was never. I don't think I ever consciously decided I'm gonna give up medicine and be a doctor.
Right.
Be a chef. It just luckily happened naturally and easily for me.
But then, why not music or art? Like, what led to cooking? Because you love to eat, or?
Yeah, growing up in New York, my mom didn't cook. Nobody cooked at home. So me and my friends I actually grew up a couple of blocks from here, 60th Street and Lexington. And we would just go eat out all the time.
Any places you remember?
Because, my friends' parents didn't cook either. So we would just go to all the restaurants. And the older you get, the more fancier restaurants you go to. And by the time my senior year came around in high school, I was going to Oriole. I was going to, because I lived in Manhattan and we were dating private school. I was going to Wrong Science, but we were dating private school girls. They expected these nice fancy restaurants. So at an early age, I was exposed to good, fine dining.
So Charlie Farmer's like, you're 20 years old. What are you doing here? Like,
even then, he was never there.
So.
And then also, my parents sent me to Korea every summer since as early as I can remember. And when you're young in Korea in the summer, it's difficult because nowadays, you can't really tell the difference between a Korean American and a Korean.
Right.
We dress the same. But those days, my jeans were too tight at one time. Very easily sort of identifiable. So I hated going to Korea, and the summers were really hot. The one thing that kept me going back and sort of not really anticipating but not dreading it so much was the food. I still remember my first tteokbokki, which is a spicy rice cakes. This was a long time ago, and these days I think it costs 2,000 won per plate or
That's
3,000
about $2, right?
At those, it was shibon for one, and they would give you a toothpick. And shibon is like a penny.
A penny,
yeah. And you get one toothpick, and you get to choose which one, and that was it. And that was my first experience with Korean street food.
They give you like sundae on like newspapers and stuff. That's.
Yeah, sundae I didn't start eating until I was like 25.
Oh, really?
But at such a young age, and they had tteokbokki here. At such a young age, I knew there was a difference between Korean food in Korea and Korean food here. I didn't know what the difference was, but it just tasted differently. And that, finding out why it was different was the motivation for me to sort of maybe think about opening up a Korean restaurant instead of something else.
So you go from Danielle, and then you take that next step, and you get a little closer. You go to Masa this time. So you go to Masa, and Masa is actually one of the most expensive, can we say that? The most expensive restaurant in New York City? Possibly.
I think in the country almost, yeah.
So, it can range from $400 to $500 per meal on sushi. And some people don't even make that much a week, let alone, to spend it on a meal, that's a pretty big commitment before tax and tip. So, you go there and you're working in the kitchen. So tell us about that.
The reason why I chose Masa after Danielle was I worked with Danielle for a couple of years, and I thought I really knew how to cook with butter.
Okay.
And butter, even now, I still believe butter makes everything taste good, or taste better. And that's what French cuisine is. There's all these techniques, there's all this everything, but then it is the use of butter that makes everything taste better. Now, and there were days where I used to use 30 pounds of butter. That's one case of butter. I would use all of it. But living in New York, that's sort of when the transition was happening, where these Japanese ingredients started coming into the menus at Per Se, menus at Danielle, and these Japanese restaurants started getting Michelin stars,
Right.
and 3 stars New York Times. I think Yasuda got that pretty early.
Right.
So I wanted to know how to cook without butter. And at that time, the best and the most expensive restaurant, because I was still into the fine dining at that time, was Masa. And that's how I ended up there.
And now you say, you took you and your friends went to Ariel, or you could go to Danielle, but you can't take your friends to Masa every week.
It's still the only restaurant that I worked at that I haven't eaten. It is still too much for me, yeah.
So there's no friends and family event at Masa where you can go?
No. And the worst thing is because there is a sort of Japanese chefs are very different from French chefs or American chefs. It's a very different teacher-student relationship. When I go to Danielle, the chefs there want to cook for me.
Oh.
They want. So it's been a year since you've been here.
Right.
This is what we're doing now.
Right.
And I love that. A Japanese chef will never make sushi for their
disciples.
Students. Yes.
Yeah.
And then think about it. If you're paying $700 for a meal, I don't want some sucker who I used to cook with, making me sushi when
Right.
Masa's there.
Right.
So, it's very different, the two kitchens.
And then what led you to leave Masa and start cooking for your friends?
So I worked a couple of years at Masa, and so the several years that I had been cooking under these great chefs, you learn a craft, you learn techniques. The best cook you can be is to exactly replicate what your chef has taught you, meaning there is zero room for creative energy. There is no creative outlet. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to become a chef, because I wanted to make something. But while you're learning how to cook, you get none of that. But after learning and understanding the food and knowing enough about the flavor balances, the textural, distinction, you get this itch. You sort of think, I know the chef does it this way, but I think it would be better if I sort of did it this way.
Yeah.
You don't do that at the restaurant.
Right.
So you start cooking for your friends.
Right.
And I started this sort of a private kitchen. My parents at that time were living on Columbus Circle, and they had a small apartment, but their terrace was 1,800 square feet.
Oh boy.
And they are avid golfers, and every weekend they went away to this little cottage in uptown. Well, not uptown, upstate. And so they would leave Thursday and come back Sunday.
Okay.
Which meant I had that terrace
Yeah.
Thursday night,
Right.
Friday night, Saturday night. So I started cooking for my friends, charging them for my costs.
Okay.
They started making reservations for birthday parties. And that was all in April. And I sort of made that into a business. And by July, we were solidly booked until November. And we were charging about $115, $120 per person for a 5 or 6 course with a wine pairing. And I was cooking Korean, French, Japanese, Spanish, everything that I knew. Because the restaurant didn't have an identity.
It's your kitchen.
It was my kitchen, and it was me cooking. So that's when I really learned that I can sort of create a menu, and cooking for somebody else became boring. I know how to cook. You teach me one thing, I will do exactly what you taught me day in, day out, and that got boring.
And I think Chef Hooni talks about the difference between being a cook and being a chef, because being a cook, you're working in the line and physically cooking for hours straight, whereas a chef doesn't usually cook all the time.
Yeah, you know what? I am a horrible cook now compared to what I was, I would say, 3-4 years ago. It is about muscle memory. It is about having this sort of knowing 12 plates in front of you and knowing what's going to be done when. And that, if you don't do it day in, day out, 6 days a week, it's very difficult. It's like sort of swinging a golf club. You swing it every day, and it seems pretty, automatic, but you don't play golf for about a year. Next time you pick up that club, your body's not going to remember anything. And cooking on the line is exactly that.
So, someone's dream job would be, eating food all day. That's great. But then, that gets exhausting because you're also working with them, 10 to 16 hours a day. So talk about that a little bit.
It's mostly teaching. You have a dish that is part of who you are. My education, my experience here, my experiences in Korea, all of my experiences working at other restaurants, I think all of my dishes sort of represent that. There's techniques in there, sorry, color, difference in texture, everything. And you need to teach somebody not to screw that up. And he's going to cook that same dish maybe 20, 30 an evening, maybe more. He's doing it for $10 an hour. Of course, he doesn't want to get in trouble, but it's difficult to be motivated and really sort of focused cooking food that's not yours.
So you finally...
you need to convince these cooks. The customers know that this food represents me. So I'm getting the praise. And the food that you put out sort of builds my reputation or upholds my reputation. But the food that he actually puts out day in, day out, it has to uphold his reputation too. Because as soon as you put out a dish that you are not 100% confident with, that makes you a chef who puts out bad food. There's no gray area. It's black and white. Do you always put out food that's good enough, or do you not do that? So once the cooks start understanding that there is no 99.9%, it has to be 100% every single time, then the trust develops.
So you develop that trust at Danielle and Masa, and now you are the head chef at Danji.
That's what I expect. That's what I expect. And the cooks know that's what I expect. And that takes a while to teach, because a lot of cooks, when I started learning how to cook, my first couple of restaurants, the school that I went to, you didn't have to be perfect all the time. But when you charge somebody $700 a plate, damn, it has to be perfect.
Be good.
And once you learn how to cook like that, you can't go back. So I demand the same sort of quality at whether it be Danji or whether it be at events that I'm cooking at. I mean, that is the only way I know how to cook.
So let's talk about Danji a little bit. Chef, when did Danji open again? It was on...
2 years ago, December of 2010.
And talk about that process of opening up a restaurant and going through New York City regulations.
Yeah. New York City is the toughest city in the world to open up a restaurant. The money, all the permits. There is no guidebook on how to open up a restaurant. you need to sort of learn from definitely other people who've opened it, but then when somebody, the experiences or what I had to do to open up Danji 2 years ago has completely changed to what I have to do now, opening up Hanjan. All the rules change, all the regulations change. It's every time you open up a restaurant, you have to go through, you have to learn again.
Right.
And that's what makes it very difficult.
I think the stats said that 75% of first-year restaurants fail their, in New York City. So the odds are really against you. You can go to Paris or Italy or even Korea, and then you open restaurants that are kind of like, family mom and pop stores. Whereas New York City, the rent is really expensive. Like regulations, health departments, they're after your back. They almost want you to fail. So you're trying to overcome that and then create this Michelin star restaurant. Well, not for you. You weren't going for that star, but create a really high-end restaurant, which is very difficult sometimes.
Well, yeah, a little bit of pride went into that. When I was cooking at other people's kitchens, especially Danielle, people were asking me. When I started Danielle, I think I was the only Asian there at that time. It was right after Alex Lee, who is the famous chef de cuisine there. But I was the only Asian. I was definitely the only Korean. And these French cooks would ask me, where should I eat Korean food? I would say buy a ticket and go to Korea. There was not, MSG is something that is, chefs consider that sort of like steroids for athletes. It's, I can't recommend a restaurant where they're using MSG, and because of that, it was difficult to recommend any Korean restaurants. So, and also, working at Danielle Masa, you learn to use all these incredible ingredients. And French people at Danielle thought it was a matter of fact. We're cooking French food, fruit from our country. We have to use the best ingredients. Same thing as Masa. And, we are just used to eating all these great ingredients. Now, there wasn't a Korean restaurant, excuse me, at that time that was using the same ingredients that we were cooking with. So that was another reason difficult to sort of recommend another Korean restaurant. So all of that made me sort of think, I need to sort of start a restaurant where we give respect to the Korean food. Cooking with these Korean flavors, and these flavors are what makes Korean food stand out. These spices, the marinades, but and using cheap ingredients, the food is still good. But using really excellent ingredients just makes that food so much better. And I wanted to show people that, yeah, ingredient does matter in Korean food.
So my first restaurant, my first Michelin star actually restaurant that I've been to was Danji. So early on I was writing these reviews to like street trucks and like, oh, but my friends were like, oh, we're gonna take you on a really really nice dinner. I was like, oh, I want to go to Danji. Like, okay. So at the time, I think we spent about $60-$70 per person. That was a pretty big deal. But I said, what's a Michelin star restaurant? But after I ate it, I was like, oh, that is it. And it's very different because compared to a Korean restaurant you go to on 32nd Street, Danji, the food is small plates, it's tapas, so it's not a very familiar background that Korean people understand. So talk about that a little bit.
I think a lot of Koreans, well, the culture of Korean food is not at restaurants, it's at the home. We cook for guests, and that is sort of the culture of us entertaining, not at restaurants but at home. So when you do that and you invite guests over, you don't want them to sort of see anything small. You want to feed them as much as possible because that's the mother's mentality. Make sure there's enough food that nobody goes hungry.
Everything's shared.
Everything is shared, which is so fine. But for me, what I learned from, I would say, Thomas Keller,
Per se and French Laundry was
palate fatigue. as good as something is, after 4 bites, it's not as good, and then it just goes all downhill from there. Um, so, and I believe that as good as something is, first 3 bites, amazing. Fourth bite, still good. Fifth bite, okay. It just
Slowly
it's still
diminishes.
good. And then if you just get full with one dish, it's like, oh, that was really good, but I don't know if I want to eat it again.
Oh.
That was one of the reasons. That's why we try to keep most of our dishes to 8 bites. Everything is designed for 2 people and 4 bites each.
Right.
Most of everything.
Right.
And also, I think Korean cuisine now, especially even in the restaurants, especially the fine dining restaurants, have forgotten about temperature. They're so worried about the plating and everything, and how
Presentation.
that they forget hot food. The better it is, the hotter it is.
Right.
That's why you go to a cheaper Korean restaurant, and the stews that come out have the burning thing.
Right.
So I wanted to feed my customers hot food that stayed hot until it was finished.
Right.
When you have a big portion, that's very difficult, and it takes 15 minutes to eat.
Right.
That's very difficult. When you have something that's 8 bites or 4 bites per person, usually our plates come back to the kitchen within 3 minutes.
Okay.
Out and then come back in 3 minutes. It doesn't have time to cool down.
Right.
So that was another reason why we chose tapas.
Right. I think a big difference between Danji and a traditional Korean restaurant is that at the Korean restaurant, they just cook, and then whatever's ready, they just serve you first. Whereas Danji, it's a New York setting, it's a very American setting, and everything comes by courses. And everything, the timing is just so accurate and calculated. So,
Yeah, well, there is an order of which dishes I think you should eat before
right.
which dishes.
Mhm.
And the customers don't know it.
Right.
But it's computerized, so when we get the list, it's in that order, that specific order, and we make sure we stick to that order.
Right.
Because I don't think you should eat fried chicken before you eat a sashimi plate,
Right.
raw fish.
Yeah.
And I think that is very important in your whole dining experience.
Right. So let's talk about high-end cuisine a little bit. An average diner. How much does an average diner spend at Danji each night?
Our average ticket's $40 per person for
40,
dinner.
40 for dinner.
And that includes drinks.
And that's pretty still expensive for a Korean restaurant. If you go on 32nd Street, you can get jjajangmyeon or naengmyeon or a full meal for under $20. Danji is a pretty expensive experience compared to traditional stereotypical Korean cuisine.
Yes, traditional Korean stereotypical restaurants that use pork that costs $1.99 a
Right.
pound. Compare that to the pork that we use, that Danielle uses, that costs $8 a pound.
Right.
We're really cheap because
Right.
Danielle, their pork belly dish is like
36,
$45,
yes,
$50. Ours is 20. So it's all relative. I don't want to be compared to the Korean restaurants that serve cheap ingredients, because then we are expensive.
Right.
But if you compare us to the restaurants that serve the same ingredients, we are actually very, very cheap.
Right.
And that is why we have to turn the restaurant so many times.
Right. Why do you think people have the perception that Korean food should be cheap, though?
Because it's still good when it's cheap.
Right.
Because it is about the spices, the marinades, the flavor.
Right.
Now, it also has a lot to do with MSG. But traditionally, in everywhere outside of Korea, you don't really experience very expensive, proper Korean restaurant.
Right.
Because there are no chefs cooking Korean food outside of Korea.
Right.
So it's all a business. And what's profitable is using cheap ingredients,
Right.
and just selling it for volume, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And you could talk about Masa a little bit. At Masa, it might be really expensive, but a lot of those costs go into supplying the fish.
Yes.
So it's not always the most profitable thing to get all these expensive ingredients and sell it, because it's so much more expensive than people think it is. Food is expensive.
Yeah, Masa is a little bit different. They get their own fish from the Tsukiji market, and it comes via Japan Airline that arrives 11 in the morning every day, at JFK, and we get the fish by 1:15. It doesn't go through customs.
Right.
So, because of that, it is so expensive.
Right.
And also, there are so many good Japanese restaurants, and there's a reason why. It is so easy to get really quality Japanese ingredients in this country. Fish, soy sauce, there's probably 100 different kinds of miso that you can get, whether it's $5 a jar or like $500 a jar. If you want to cook good Japanese food, there's nothing stopping you. Korean food, on the other hand, there are two doenjang companies, so Korean soybean paste miso companies, that all the restaurants use.
Okay.
So certain restaurants use one or the other. Some restaurants do a little blending,
Right.
but it is still these two different doenjang. So
Right.
it's difficult to even try to stand out.
Right. So now let's talk about the next step. So in 2011, Danji received a Michelin rating from the Michelin Guide. So talk about that. What is the Michelin Guide?
You probably know better than me. It is, I grew up thinking the Michelin Guide is like the Tony Awards or the Oscars or the Emmys for a chef. It rewards chefs. And traditionally, it has been to very expensive, hot, fine dining restaurants. So when I was opening Danji, it was the furthest thing from my mind. If I was sort of thinking about it, I would have gotten better plates, better flatware,
Tablecloth.
yes, all of that. But it was my first restaurant, and I just needed to sort of make enough money to pay off the bank.
Right.
So I don't know how we got it. It wasn't my sort of intention, but I think we were just very fortunate with the timing.
Right.
I think Korean food has been sort of wanting to be legitimized or respected,
Right.
and it was looking for a chef who can sort of facilitate that.
Right.
And luckily, we were good enough for them.
So in the culinary world, the Michelin Guide was originally designed for taxi drivers in France, and they would say, if someone got on the cab and say, "Hey, which restaurant do you recommend?" The cab driver would look at the book and say, "Oh, this place is good. This place is good." And then the Michelin Guide also came to the United States, and now we have all these bloggers like me, or these reviewers who go to places and they can tell you, "Oh, this pizza is good here. This burrito is good there." But Michelin kind of still stood out because it was the fine dining guidebook to look at if you wanted the best restaurants in the world. So if you can get 1 to 3 stars, and getting 1 star is like getting a gold medal in the culinary world. You've done it. And then getting 3 stars is, you have to go above and beyond. It has to be a restaurant where, you pay, a plane ticket just to go to dine that restaurant.
It's sort of like you go to a 1-star restaurant and it's an excellent restaurant.
Right.
You go to a 2-star and it's the best restaurant.
Right.
The best chef. And a 3-star restaurant is you have God cooking for you.
Right. And Danielle and Masa are 3 Michelin star restaurants. Granted, that's why it's so expensive, and because they use the highest ingredients they can afford.
And when the Michelin first came to New York, Danielle only had 2 stars.
Right.
And when I was working, Danielle only had 2 stars. And the last year I was there, it got its 3rd star. But what it did to get its 3rd star was not the food. The food was always good. It was the plates, the glassware we changed, and the servers had to speak better English,
Right.
or fake French better. I think that, and that's what got it the 3rd star, because we didn't do anything differently in the kitchen.
Right. Because the Michelin Guide, they actually don't look at the value of the restaurant. It's good value. They just look at how top-notch and quality it is. I think that's the distinction that they make. And, and then the reviews start pouring in. You get reviews from the New York Times and New York Magazine, and everyone's raving about Danji. And there's a good word in the New York community. So talk about that a little bit.
I thought, I thought we were a very fair restaurant, and a very honest restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
We had a formula of, what costs us to make something,
Right.
and that's what we charged. We made sure nothing was over $20.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was, we would cut down the portion to make
Right.
sure that it fit. We wanted a restaurant where, at that time we were talking about 1% versus 99%. We wanted to show the 99%
Right.
what we could do.
Right.
So, I mean, cooking with all these expensive ingredients, the costs go up, but we thought that volume would make up for it.
Mm-hmm.
The profit wasn't as much as some certain other restaurants, but we got the media attention, so we were able to sort of succeed and go on cooking our food, our style of food,
Right.
because of the volume.
Mm-hmm. And then I actually received a phone call from my mother yesterday, and when I went to Danji for the first time, she's like, "Oh, everything's so small and you're so expensive. Why are you spending so much money on food?" But then, I think once they understood that about palate fatigue or eating small portions, it doesn't always have to be about quantity. It can always be through quantity as well. And I think their perception is kind of changed to positive.
And another reason why it costs us more is we get our soybean paste,
Mhm.
sesame oil, red pepper flakes, red pepper paste, and soy sauce from Korea. And that's what differentiates us. It also makes it a lot easier for us to cook because those traditional artisanal products that we get really identifies with Korea.
Right.
So for me, it is like going to Korea and eating.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so different than what you get on 32nd Street, that we can't go back to using the supermarket products once you start cooking with these ingredients.
Right. Because if we go to the restaurant and we try the food, we know it's good, but we might not necessarily know why. But then if you start cutting down and using less quality pork and less quality these Korean ingredients, I think people will know what distinguishes.
Not only the people, but my cooks. Because who wants to work with sub inferior products?
Yeah.
And I have to, my cooks are cooking Korean food when they should be cooking at Daniel,
Right.
Jean Georges, Le Bernardin, or these expensive other restaurants. Most of my cooks have experience cooking at 3-star Michelin restaurants.
But how many of them are Korean?
None of them. I don't have a single Korean cook.
Right.
But these guys know how to cook good food, and they want to learn how to cook Korean food. For me, it's a privilege and an honor to have them learn from me. And I can't give them inferior products.
Right.
I can't use MSG in front of these guys, right, even if I wanted to. Right. So it's a good positive cycle.
Right. So a little offbeat question: how often do you get compared to David Chang?
Last year I was in the restaurant at Danji, and my manager came up to me laughing, and she goes, "Yeah, table 62. They were asking, what's David Chang doing in this restaurant?" so yeah, quite often. I think I speak better Korean than he does, though.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
But as Korean Americans, because he necessarily doesn't cook Korean food, you distinguish yourself by cooking food with authentic Korean flavors. And
yeah, I think I'm known as a Korean chef.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's what Danji kind of set the restaurant apart from a lot of the other places as well. So let's talk about something more relaxing.
Okay.
Your day off. So Chef Hooni, how often do you work?
If you had asked me that 5 months ago, I would have said 6 days a week, and even on the 7th day, I am constantly thinking about the restaurant.
Right.
Now I work less just because my major responsibility is to get Hanjan open. Right. I have 2 chefs. Before, I was the only chef, so I was there every single day, and everybody had to report to me. But because now I'm opening another restaurant, I can't be the chef of both restaurants, so I had to hire 2 people, not just one.
Right.
One to be the head chef at Danji, one to be the head chef at Hanjan. And they've been sort of working together at Danji until Hanjan opens. So I am not needed as much.
Right.
So I do go every day to taste, make sure everything is sort of how I imagined everything to be. But these contractors go home after 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
So I actually don't have much to do.
Right.
So I am enjoying going out to eat. I think I've gained about 15 pounds
Oh.
the past 6 months. But I do eat out a lot,
Right.
where I didn't for the past year and a half, as soon as Hanjan opened,
Right.
as soon as Danji opened.
Right. But a year ago, a cook, how often would a cook, be in the restaurant? 16 hours.
Oh yeah, when I was working at Danielle, 16 hours, 14 on the weekdays, 16 on the weekends, 6 days a week, minimum. Sometimes 7 days a week because there were bar mitzvahs and Jewish weddings on a Sunday. And we would get paid for 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
We didn't have clocks where we clocked in. You show up, you get paid for 10 hours, but you work, 14, 16.
Right. Is it more, at least for you, is it more difficult to become a chef than it was to go through medical school? Do you get the headaches or,
No, there wasn't a day that I regretted becoming a cook, becoming a chef.
Right.
Not a single day.
Not a single headache?
Not a single day.
Oh.
It is, I growing up, I wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to sort of help people, heal people, and that sort of gave me some sort of pride. And then I think at one point or another, I realized it's not helping people that drives me. It's pleasing people. And there is a big difference.
Right.
When you work at a hospital, sometimes there's not much you can do.
Right.
And a lot of the times, the patient, forget the patient, but the family of the patient, the relative of the patient, is not happy. So you could do the best that you could do, and you get nothing back from the patient. Whereas cooking, every day you get positive feedback.
Right.
Every day, and that is what sort of makes all that hard work worthwhile.
Right. So you wake up in the morning every single day and you say, "I'm ready to go to work."
No.
No?
It takes a while for me to get up, because cooking is also, it's an everyday thing.
Right.
You can't prepare a lot of things. Right. So every day it's a new project,
Right.
and that's another good thing, because at the end of that day, when we were so upset because something didn't turn out right, next day you fix it, make it, start over again.
And I think that's that's what gives New York City chefs the drive, because they could be cooking anywhere else, but then they choose to try to beat the odds and cook here amongst all the other great chefs as well.
Yeah, and I still am pretty confident that every other chef in the world thinks that New York is the capital of maybe not food, but the restaurant world.
Right.
And so many chefs have come and not succeeded as much, but everybody who's anybody comes to try.
Right. Because you can go to Paris and eat the best French food, or you go to Italy and eat the best Italian food, but then in New York City you have so many options. Sometimes that's it's a burden. Sometimes you don't know where to eat because there's so many choices. But the chefs, how does it feel to compete against not maybe let's not compete, but go against all the other chefs? How do you distinguish what is good and what is bad?
How do you distinguish what is good and what is bad?
Right. It's not like sports where in golf or tennis you can tell, oh, I am better than you, or I did better than you. Whereas in the culinary world it's a little different because there's no competition.
Well, it is not a competition. We all wish each other the best, because the better the restaurants are in New York, the more diners we have coming out.
Right.
So even on our block, we have a
ramen shop,
ramen
Toto
Toto, yeah. there's never been competition, and we've always understood that more people coming to the block to
Right.
eat at one restaurant will pass by the other restaurant, will be like, oh, why are people waiting to eat here?
Yeah.
And they will come and try it out. And I think that is New York. New York, people, so many tourists come just to eat in New York that we really want to keep that up.
Mhm.
Now, within us, like, we don't really care who's better than the other person. It is, cooking is so personal
Right.
that it's difficult. It's not a competition. It's not like Chopped
Mhm.
or Top Chef. It is, you are putting yourself on the plate,
Mhm.
and if you do a good job, then you, as a diner, you appreciate it, and then you move on.
Right.
You shouldn't really be comparing
I,
people.
I think a lot of Korean restaurants, they are afraid to hire Korean chefs because they think, oh, this person's going to steal my recipe or this person's going to steal my style and then make their own restaurant. So I'm not going to hire a Korean chef. Whereas in New York City, you want to teach the cooks how to replicate and then show them these flavors so that, maybe in the future they're going to open up their own restaurants as well. And it's almost like a mentorship and you're guiding them towards success later on as well.
That is the French. That is the French sort
Right.
of cooking culture.
Right.
You always want the student to absorb everything that you teach them, and sort of make it their own, have their own creative flair, and even make it better.
Right. So, let's say now you mentioned you're eating out, you're, kind of relaxing a little bit. So if I went to your house right now, uninvited,
Mhm.
what would you cook for me?
um, I'm sorry, but I don't cook at my house.
Right?
Yeah. I don't remember the last time I cooked something besides heating up some nachos with melted cheese in a microwave.
Backstage,
It's difficult for a professional cook to cook at home because we have dishwashers. We have people who sort of clean up after us. And we have 15 pots that we can use to make one dish.
Right.
It's a hard habit to break.
I actually asked Chef what he has in his fridge, and I was expecting like all these sauces, and she's like, I don't have anything in my fridge. Yeah.
We do. I just don't know.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law lives with us
Mhm.
to take care of my 3-year-old son,
Mhm.
and he has a palate. So
Right.
I'm always bringing very good ingredients home to him, and she tries her best,
Mhm.
and that's probably what we have at home, but nothing that I cook with.
Right. So, what does your son like to eat? What does your family like to eat?
My son has a palate.
Mhm.
He loves matsutake mushrooms. He loves wild, sort of Copper River salmon. He has known to differentiate good ingredients versus what he eats at school.
Oh.
I think he got that from his mother because at that age I didn't know the difference.
Right.
But it sort of innately tells you that even if somebody doesn't know anything, that there is a difference in flavor, texture, even at such a young age. So yeah.
Don't tell him about Masa until he turns 21.
uh,
But so, you have your day off on
Mhm.
Sundays, you're relaxing, and now it just got even busier. You can't have your Sundays off because Hanjan's opening.
Mm.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, no, Hanjan. I've never worked at a restaurant that opened on Sundays.
Right.
I believe it's so hectic at a restaurant. There
Mhm.
has to be a beginning of the week and an end of the week.
Right.
Because at the end of the week, we throw out everything that we had ordered the beginning of that week.
Mhm.
If you don't have that, and Sunday's part of the schedule, there is no beginning or end.
Right.
And you could so get lost in these ingredients rotting in the walk-in, losing count of what came in when.
Mhm.
So it's so easy. If you have Sunday off, Saturday night, anything produce, throw it out.
Okay.
Or take it home.
Right.
Which I do.
Right.
But yeah, I don't believe in opening on Sundays.
So now you're starting Hanjan, which is coming when?
Soft opening end of next month,
Uh-huh.
and we hope to open December 5.
Right. So let's talk about Hanjan and what your expectations are now that Danji was so successful.
So Danji, we opened with a concept of a Korean tapas bar. With Hanjan, it's a New York version of a joomak. A joomak is sort of an old style Korean tavern that used to pair usually makgeolli or soju, but usually makgeolli that they would make in house with a couple of dishes that the owner made. But what the whole joomak philosophy or concept was attractive is Korea was always a country of classes. There's the Yangban and the Sangnom a long time ago, and even now there's Gangnam, right?
Right.
But a chumak was even in the old times where the Yangbans would drink at these kiseng houses, where the girls would pour for them, and the Sangnoms would drink it anywhere.
Right.
But chumak was where they got together and drank together because it was the one respite next to a road of far travel.
But they were both drinking makgeolli, which is the rice wine.
Yes. So, and I think New York, there is no sort of class system, and Korean food, whether it be fancy or cheap, it's something that anybody and everybody can enjoy.
Right.
It's paired with alcohol, and I think that's the major concept.
So, what are one of the lessons that you learned at Danji that you want to apply at Hanjan?
I don't know about lessons, but it was my first business, so it was my first restaurant. So Hanjan is everything that I would change if I had known better opening Danji. I'm applying it to Hanjan. Danji, the problem with Danji, there's no room for people to wait. So everybody's waiting outside or the bar next door. And we lose a lot of revenue when they're drinking next door. But it would have been very presumptuous of me to open my first restaurant where 20 people could wait because I know everybody's going to be waiting to eat at Danji.
It has a reputation of an hour or two, maybe not 2 hours, but an hour wait.
Yeah,
per person.
an hour wait is normal. It's a very small restaurant. So Hanjan, we have an area where people can sort of wait comfortably before they're seated.
And the burning question was, are there going to be reservations? And the
Yes.
answer is
Yes. We realized a lot of people, especially the elderly, who are uncomfortable waiting, do not go to restaurants that don't have reservations. So we are accepting reservations at Hanjan, but it's predominantly still going to be a walk-in restaurant. We're only sort of reserving one small section of the restaurant. But if you plan ahead, we want you to dine with us.
Right.
So that we're going to try to fix. So many dishes that I have in here that I couldn't do at Danji because the kitchen's so small. We don't have the equipment. We're going to do at Hanjan. And that includes, jokbal, which is trotters, sundae, which is blood sausages, and even small intestine, veal intestine, which is gopchang. All of these things we just wanted to but couldn't, that we're going to do at Hanjan. And it's even makgeolli. We're trying to get makgeolli on draft with a frosted mug. I know Koreans like to sort of pour in, but just imagine a frosted mug with a freshly poured makgeolli with a nice head. So all of these things we're going to try at Hanjan.
And I think the commonalities between Hanjan and Danji are still that it's comfort food. It's comfort food for not just the Korean community but the New York community as well.
I think the best food in Korea is comfort food.
Right.
I think people talk about these gujolpans. They're beautiful, and these very sort of noble palace dishes. I don't know if that innately is good for the palate. It may be good for the health. It may be good for the eyes. But New York is so beyond pretty things.
Right.
If you're going out to eat, it has to taste good.
Right.
Because they have museums. They can see pretty things there.
Right. So let's talk about the future of Korean food and Korean culture, just in case. I know Gangnam style is a very popular thing, which kind of erupted. But let's talk about Korean cuisine. Um, Chungshik recently also received a Michelin star as well, and Chungshik is kind of not the opposite of Danji, but the very elegant, very tablecloth, very long dinner menus, and they also received the Michelin star as well. So what has been your response to that?
More Korean chefs who can open Korean restaurants outside of Korea.
Right.
It just adds to Korean cuisine as a whole.
Right.
Um,
As you mentioned, it's a camaraderie, kind of a friendship between all the Korean restaurants as well.
And it's funny, of the 300 Korean restaurants in New York, the two restaurants that are chef owned, and I think there are only 2 restaurants that are chef owned, have the 2 Michelin stars. That defines or differentiates the growth and prominence of Japanese restaurants in this country versus Korean ones. There are so many Japanese chefs who own restaurants as chef owners, and they put their name on the line, their pride on the line, and their entire career on the line for that one restaurant. It's difficult not to succeed, or at least do well. Whereas Korean restaurants, when it's not a chef, when it's a business, it's a project. This one fails, close it up. We open another one with a different name. Same owner, people don't know the difference. As chefs, we don't have that sort of, what do you call it?
You need pride, and this
we don't have that sort of hall pass. Like, we can't fail, because once you fail, that failure stays with you for the rest of your life. Once you taste somebody and the food isn't good, you remember. You don't go to that chef's restaurant ever again. I always tell my cooks, in New York, you can go to a restaurant 8, 9 times, excellent. And then the 10th time you go, it's not good. The mentality is, things are changing. It's going downhill. And you don't go back. Because there are a million other restaurants that's willing to take over that spot. Especially with Korean cuisine. We have regulars. But if we start serving food that's not good, they're going to move on to the next one and not come back. So
I think chefs use the term, you're as good as your last dish.
Yes. That's a good one. And having that mentality versus not having that mentality is such a huge difference, because ultimately it is about what's on that plate on your table that dictates how good that restaurant is, not how much money you've made at the end of the night, which is the focus for a business versus a focus for a chef-owned restaurant.
So how do you know? How do you measure success then?
In so many different ways. I have a kid, so I have to, I do have to worry about his tuition.
And him going to Masa eventually.
I think it is irresponsible for a chef owner of a restaurant to not worry about finances, because no matter how good the food is, we have 23 employees at Danji. And of the 23 employees, if you take into consideration their families, we have about 60 people that, yes, a couple of them have many kids and parents that live with them. We have 60 people that I'm responsible for. My paycheck that I pay them can sort of change their lives or help their lives. And knowing that, you really need to make sure that restaurant is making money. And I think that takes priority over sort of me personally making money, just because I get so much more out of it, and plus I get to open another restaurant, and plus I have sources for income at other places, whereas my cooks or my servers, they have that one job that they're relying on you to make sure that I get my numbers straight so that they get their paycheck.
So not just your restaurant, but what would be success for Korean cuisine in New York City? What would define?
I would love for it to become like Japanese food, where I think 30 years ago Japanese food was just cheap, just cheap,
Some people didn't even want to
teriyaki
touch.
boy,
Yeah.
raw fish.
Yeah.
Um, um, and it took a while for Japanese food.
Still like French food, Italian food, and Japanese food are
Japanese,
the
yeah,
top three. Yeah.
and I do believe it is not because of government intervention, which I think the Korean government really wants to do marketing. I think it is chef owners because with food it's so personal. It is not about advertising how good bibimbap is.
Right.
You can do that, but where do you get to taste it?
Right.
It is about a chef and the customer having a relationship by sharing of the food and you deciding if this cuisine is good or not good.
So if a Korean culinary student came up to you and said, "I need some advice. What should I do?" What would be the first advice that you would give to the student?
It's not just even Korean. I do wonder why so many. CIA has about 1,500 students, I think, at one time, and like over 100 are Korean students. And
Nowadays.
Yes, now.
Yeah.
10 years ago, there were maybe 10. Now, they all sort of want to cook French.
Right. Fancy food.
Fancy food. Even Chungshik, he wants to cook this fancy food.
Tweezers.
Yeah, and all the cooks that are sort of graduating and have graduated for 5, 6, 7 years, they're still at the best Korean restaurants. I will go to Danielle and I will see 7 Korean faces. I will go to Per Se and I will see all Korean faces. For me, what I experienced cooking at Danielle French Food was I saw these French cooks cooking food that was more than just technique, flavor, taste. They were cooking who they were.
Passion.
More than passion.
More than passion.
Who they were, their history, their heritage.
Right.
That's what they were cooking. And that's the pride that they had, more than just the technique. So what I realized earlier on was, as good as I may be cooking French food, compared to them, I'm sort of like a pretender. I can never understand cooking French food as much as they can.
As much as you love bread and butter.
Exactly.
Right.
They're cooking food that from 3 years old, they saw their grandmothers cooking it, their mothers cooking. They lived it. Me, I can sort of make it taste good, or maybe make it taste as good as theirs, I think, but they have more. And that's why I started cooking Korean food, because I sort of wanted to cook with that pride. And being Korean American, it was very easy for me to cook Korean food because it was really just putting on the plate who I was.
Right.
And I didn't know how easy that was for these French kids.
Right.
Because they would come in, easy. But they were just cooking who they were.
Right.
It was just bred in them.
Right.
And for me to cook Korean food is that easy.
I think French cuisine, it's codified and it's on a recipe. Cook this like this. Whereas Korean cuisine is kind of like, hey, how much salt should I put? And your mother would say, like, enough. Or 적당히, like, enough. It's not in a dictionary or it's not in a recipe book. And that's one of the distinctions between French food and Korean food is that,
Korean have this term, 손맛.
손맛.
Which is beyond recipes. And that really does apply to every other cooking because even with the recipes, if it was that easy, everybody could do it. Because following a recipe is not that difficult. But what it is knowing one day the onions aren't as sweet. Right. Knowing one day the garlic is a little spicy. So after the recipe's done, the chef sort of tastes it and we adjust. And knowing how to fix that dish after it's been done perfectly via the recipe, making the adjustments. And to me, all chefs do that, and that is how I define 손맛 with Korean cooking.
And hopefully that translates as well next year when you have your cookbook coming out as well.
Yeah.
So that should be a fun project. How's that been going?
Yeah, it's written.
Actually,
it's written, but yeah, we're having people sort of recipe test and it's coming out very differently.
Right.
It's just because we're used to cooking with all these good ingredients, but the recipe testers actually have to go to the supermarket and buy it.
Right.
And we're realizing, wow, there's a huge difference.
Right. So it's just even beyond so much. Even if you follow the recipe,
Yeah,
it has to
yeah.
be about the ingredients.
So it is about tweaking the recipes, and informing the people in sort of like Iowa, where they can, mail order doenjang and gochujang.
Right.
All of that is very important, which we're sort of dealing with right now.
Very cool. So right before we wrap up, I'm gonna let Chef Hooni fill in the blanks. So I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions, and you're just gonna answer what comes on top of your head. So Korean cuisine is.
Oh, Korean cuisine. I'll come back to that one. Sorry.
A food trend that I like is.
Food trend that small plates. I think a lot of the media think that small plates is a way for restaurants to try to rip off customers. It's so not, because the labor that goes into it, the amount of dishes, the washing of the dishes, it really is. We really think that people shouldn't eat so much. And that is a big deal. The portions that we sell in the city compared to any other city in this world is just ridiculous. And you're feeding the psyche that nobody wants to waste. So if you get this big bowl of pasta, you want to do the best job you can, because it's throwing away money if you don't. But that leads to obesity, that leads to overeating, and that leads to so many negative things. And worst of all, it just doesn't taste as good at the end.
Right.
But yeah, I think small plates, in small plates, there's no commitment. You can just eat 2 small plates, or if you're in the mood, have 7. And that, I think, is giving the diners a choice to spend whatever they want to spend. And that's something that I actually hope continues.
Okay. The Michelin Guide is.
It's good if you get one, and you're content. It could be detrimental if that is your goal, because a lot of chefs really sort of lose the focus of your diners, your customers being what should give you happiness and contentment, versus the Michelin stars and the New York Times stars. And I've seen restaurants change things around to get that extra star. And Michelin, I think they have 5 or 6 judges or critics going around New York City
Anonymously.
Yeah. When you have hundreds of diners every day, but then you let these 5 or 6 critics determine your value, your worth, it's just a dangerous situation.
Okay. Food trucks are.
It's good for lunch. It's very good for lunch.
Do you have any specific food trucks that you like, or?
I don't like to eat at food truck. We've done a food truck event at Danji. For 5 days, we went around serving free sliders. You are so limited of what you can do on that truck, that if you transfer the same people, the same ingredients to a kitchen, the food would come out at least 50% better. Knowing that, even if it's cheaper, if you had the opportunity to go to a sit-down restaurant, why would you go to a food truck? But I do understand that a lot of people working in Midtown, you have no choice. And in that regard, it's a great option for the lunch. But I think that's where it stops.
Okay. Reality chef competitions are.
I've said that, cooking should never be a competition. It's sort of like, if a chef is successful, he will, on the plate, show you who you are, and basically it comes down to who do you like better, me or you. So
never a Top Chef Masters by any chance?
No. I might judge one. I might judge Chopped, But yeah, it's it's entertainment. It's completely different from reality.
Right. Last question. Food bloggers are.
you know, I can't really say anything negative. Well, no, yes I can, but I will not because they do really help our industry. Um, and if a restaurant is good, you will always have, you may have these one or two people who come in and say a lot of negative things about your restaurant, even if it's not true. But you do have those other 98 that say very good things. So, um, I think it helps our industry. But yeah, I think
It generates a lot of buzz.
yeah,
For the community.
yeah, it does. It does. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to open it up to Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to come up to the mic.
Wow, that's too far. Can I talk loud?
Yeah.
Oh, just give me. Thank you. I'm a retired physician. And when I retired 10 years ago, I wanted to start a restaurant right here in Manhattan. But a good friend of mine who used to own a four-star restaurant just stopped, did everything to discourage me to not to start the restaurant, and I did up. Of course, I ended up not opening the restaurant. So I say this to you: I take this eating very seriously. Having said that, the one of the beauty, shall we say, virtue of Korean food, traditional way, we put all the food on the table. Now you mentioned the temperature. There comes the shinseollo, or jjigae. But we don't see shinseollo anymore around here, at least. But talking with also Westerners who been in Korea, enjoying Korean food, they don't understand. I'm one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't we keep a traditional way? Because serving all the goods from the table, maintain our tradition, family style, yet you can serve good food. Now, what is your comment on that?
I think that is just the difference in Korea versus the Western world. I think the Western world expects food to be coming out in courses. We sort of have, I wouldn't say disrespect, but a lack of respect for that whole thing coming out because it doesn't respect the temperature. And number two, there has to be an order, just like at Danji. And I think it doesn't have to be, but it helps when there is an order of what you should. Because an 18-course dinner that I had at Per Se told a story. It went from, it could be a story about geography. It started in Europe, it started down south, or it could be just a story of how the chef wants your palate to work. Start with very acidic, let's go sweet, and then let's go tannic, whatever. And I think in a course, you can do that. You can sort of have a little story. You throw everything out there at the same time. My experience and the person dining in front of me can have a completely different experience. And as a chef, we don't want that. We want to be more in control. Um, and then, you're right. Koreans expect to eat everything the same time because Koreans also like to have dinner in 45 minutes and leave. Whereas Europe, US, we expect if we're paying $500 or $300, we expect 3 hours or 2.5 hours. So it's just a cultural difference, I think.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Jenny. I'm a line cook. I was just kind of wondering what your parents thought when you quit medical school. Because I was pre-med too.
Oh, okay. My mother did not speak to me for one entire year. And I'll actually tell you a funny story. So for the entire year, my mother didn't speak to me. And then when I started doing well at Danielle, she sort of started coming around. Then she came to Danielle to eat. And then she was a little accepting. And then I worked at Masa. And then I opened my own restaurant. And, I thought, we're good now. We're completely good. until I saw an interview that she did. And what the interviewer asked was, your son's been really successful. I know you didn't talk to him for like a year. When did you really start accepting the fact that he gave up medicine to become a chef? And her response was very honest. Not until last month when he won that Michelin guy. But yeah, but I always thank my parents, especially my mother, because I was very secure with her love. Meaning, I knew she didn't speak to me for a year because she honestly just wanted what was best for me. And also, she gave me the insights to sort of know that I should really go after what makes me happy, even going against her will. I still should go after what I want. Um, so yeah, it wasn't pretty though.
What do your parents do?
They both own separate businesses. My mom is a fashion designer. I think that's where I get the artistic side. Uh, yeah.
Does anyone have? Oh, yes.
Thank you for your time. What is the difference in the two restaurants, in the old and the new one? Do you have a different approach, or is it going to be, since the cooks are trained
It
the
is
same?
more going to be. I think Danji is a very good introduction to Korean flavors, but it's sort of very mainstream. Uh, Hanjan, the second restaurant, is my inspiration comes from Korean street food. Um, Very blue collar, what Korean factory workers eat after their day off, after their work. So, it is much more ingredients that are adventurous. So I would say more Korean.
And Chef, I think you mentioned that you don't cut back on the spices or the flavors.
No. I
Absolutely.
mean, I think New York. I mean, I respect New York well enough where if it's spicy, it darn better be spicy. Or they appreciate authenticity much more than the dumbed down version. And even though Danji looks like it's westernized, if you taste the flavors, it is more Korean than anything you can get in this country.
Thank you.
Hi. With all the restaurants in New York, it's so challenging just to get a review when a new restaurant opens, and you got such rave reviews right out of the gate. So I was wondering, just in terms of your own efforts to try to get notice and to try to get on people's radar early on when Danji opened, was that something that you worked at, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, we did not work. We don't have a publicist. We don't have a PR. Um, um, we really respect word of mouth. And word of mouth starts from the cooks who go to your restaurant. They tell their chefs, I had a very good meal here. It gets transferred to, I remember Danielle, one of his interviews earlier, said, what are your restaurants that you go to now or that you really like? And he mentioned, my restaurant. And word of mouth sort of, I think, put us on the map. And that's why it took a while. We were not busy for a good 5 months. But we just had to, do what what we needed to do. And then all of that media just happened. So, it is everything. It is being honest. It is about fair, the value in the food. And it is just about sort of not really going after the media attention, but if you deserve it, it'll come.
Yes. In the back.
Is there more? I
Oh,
can't
someone
see.
in the back.
Hi, I'm Songjun Nam, assistant professor at Rutgers University. Korean government tried to promote the Korean food, even they set some budgets like a $5 million to open a New York Korean restaurant. But yeah, they spent all of the money just in consulting project and instead. And yeah, they tried to standardize recipes, and they tried uh, to vitalize the Korean food in the world. But what it's just putting money is not a good way to promote to start a new good restaurant. So you mentioned the essence, the goal, the core of the Korean restaurant is to have the best chef, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? What would be the best policy Korean government can do with such a money, $1 million?
I'll give it to me. I'll open a couple of the restaurants. I think it is to sort of support chefs who want to cook Korean food. It is supporting chefs who are very good cooking Korean food in Korea to maybe help them out, give them a reason to come to New York and open up a Korean restaurant in New York. I would love a really famous Korean chef in Korea to come here and just even open a pop-up restaurant and to show us what he's about, you know? And that, it takes money, but the problem with that is the Korean government sees that as helping individuals. I went through ordeals with the Korean government where they backed out of programs that they were supposed to help me out. Like I was supposed to be cooking at the James Beard Awards. First Korean restaurant, or first time the James Beard Awards was allowing a Korean chef to cook Korean food. And I thought it was a great opportunity. So I asked the Korean government, you know, can we get a little stipend so I can get Hanu Korean beef from Korea, all these great ingredients? And they said yes. So ordered everything. 2 weeks before the event, they said, sorry, we can't give you the check because the we think that we're an organization not to support one chef, but the entire cuisine. Things like that really upset me. And they just don't get it. You know, the Korean government does not get it. They will never get it. The government will never get it. Like standardizing recipes is like communism. You're telling every cook you can only cook one way, but that's what they're promoting. So, you know, we need to act based on what us foodies and us chefs know, and we can't rely on any of their money.
But the First Lady did make a visit to Danji.
Yes, and we cooked our heart out for her.
Yeah, she could fly all the way from Korea.
Yeah. And you know, we'll do that with anybody. She didn't get any special. She paid for it too.
Right.
But yeah, that's all we can do. I can cook. You guys can choose the better Korean restaurants and dine.
Okay. Thanks so much, Hooni and Jason.
There's a last question.
Oh, there's one more question?
There's actually one more question in the back.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Chef Kim, I admire your food. I have been to your restaurant a few times.
Thank you.
I think you have revolutionized Korean cooking, frankly. You brought it into an international prominence. And I really admire the way you have done that. My question is really has nothing to do with food per se, but as an owner and as an executive chef of the restaurant. My son opened a restaurant recently in Soho. And the issue that we have is what we hired a very fantastic chef, but he's a free control and he's a diva. And he's creating a lot of issues in there. On the one hand, you say, you know what, I had enough of this. Walk away, we'll start all over again. On the other hand, he has a 5-star reviews, basically. How do you deal with something like that? You know, on the one hand, you're saying, this is a business question, it's not a food question. How do you deal in the future if you go expand beyond New York and go global or go statewide, okay? How do you handle this kind of thing when you have a chef that he wants to take complete control and yet, you know, there's certain issues as a businessman you have to take care of? Thank you.
As a businessman, what's important to you is the numbers. And in that regards, if he is spending too much money on food without raising the prices, then he's got to go. I mean, because you are a businessman. As a chef, it would be a completely different answer. It would be a complete different answer. I think that's what makes restaurants difficult in New York. If you are not a chef, it is almost impossible to make any money opening a restaurant or running a restaurant. I've only known 2 real successful restaurateurs, Danny Meyer
Danny Meyer.
and Drew Neurpoint
Yeah.
in New York.
Right.
Everybody else is a chef owner. You look at the 68 Michelin starred restaurants in the Michelin Guide. I think you take out Drew Neurpoint and Danny Meyer, every other restaurant is a chef-owned restaurant, except maybe 1 or 2. I would say for you as a restaurant owner, you don't need that chef. Chefs are a dime a dozen. Yeah, he's good, but you really don't need a diva, because one bad seed makes everybody's lives a little bit more difficult. The only bad seed in a restaurant should be the owner, because you can't fire yourself. Everybody else should be part of a team. So if you have a bad seat and that's not you, you got to get rid of them.
Okay, on that note. Danji's bartender is here tonight. So, yes. Hooni, you want to tell us what he's serving?
Okay, Bobby over there is, so I don't know if you guys know what a sujongwa is. Sujongwa is a traditional Korean, I would say a dessert drink, very autumnal. Cinnamon. Can you turn on the light? It has cinnamon, it has dates, it has pine nuts, it has,
he said ginger.
Ginger, it has persimmon. All of these amazing fall products, and you sort of make a tea out of it. We made it a cocktail. So it has a rye whiskey, bitters, lemon peel, a little bit of lemon juice, orange peel, a little bit of lemon juice. And this cocktail was created before Danji opened, and I introduced sujongwa to my bar mixologist, who is very American, and he had no sort of concept of what this drink was for. But with his sort of liquor knowledge, he made this drink, which was, I thought, the best drink that we have. So please enjoy. And it is potent, so be careful. And go ahead, guys.
And then I also want to thank Best Friend, this evening's dessert sponsor, and they'll be serving their specialty, which they call chaps. And it's a delicious, handmade, all-natural, gluten-free, contemporary Korean rice cake. So please enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.